All right, Advanced Algebra 2. Hope everybody enjoyed their long weekend. Got re-energized, got some things done, helped out around the house, all that good stuff. Hope everybody's feeling fine. Okay, welcome to Mr. Patterson's class, if they're also here watching this. But we are going to start, this should be, and by the way, this should be Tuesday the 14th. And we are going to start looking at some right triangle trigonometry. Okay, where these are the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons on your calculator. Okay, that's what we're going to be looking at here today, and it only deals with right triangles. And we are going to today just kind of look at the layout of a right triangle and how we determine which of these three trig functions we are using. We're not going to solve anything today. All right, so the layout of a right triangle, we all should remember some geometry here, and that it's a right triangle because it has a right angle, and we know that the side that is opposite the right angle gets a special name. That's the hypotenuse. Okay, and it's the longest side of our right triangle, but that only has one spot that it can be. All right, so anytime you have a right triangle, and these two right triangles I have down here, they only have one hypotenuse. Cannot be two hypotenusae, whatever the plural for that would be. It can only be one in each triangle, and it is always in the same spot, opposite of your 90. Now, as far as the other two sides go, the two sides that make our right angle down here, all right, we want to be able to label them separately, and those depend upon where your angle is. So notice on my two triangles here, on the left, my angle's in the lower left, and on the right, my angle's in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, so it depends upon where that angle is, and you look at it in two ways. You say, what's across from the angle? Across from the angle, we label the opposite side. All right, so if I'm in the lower left, across from that angle is the opposite side. Now remember, this side is labeled hypotenuse. It cannot be labeled anything else. All right, this side would be right next door to it. So that's not opposite of it. Opposite is all the way across the triangle. So over here, again, this is the only side that can be called, that's the only thing it can be called, is the hypotenuse. All the way over across from that angle is our opposite. So see how the opposite would be, the two sides that we labeled opposite would be in different positions depending upon where our angle is. Then the side that is right next door to us, which is the remaining side, we call that the adjacent side. If I can spell. Okay, it's adjacent to us. ADJ, adjacent. Right next door, the only side that we haven't labeled yet, adjacent. All right, so the hypotenuse stays in the same place. But notice how in this triangle this was opposite, but over here it's adjacent because our angle changed locations. Here this is adjacent, over here it's opposite. Again, because our angle changed positions. Okay, so we got to get our sides labeled correctly. And if we could do that, we can set these things up and be on the right track. Now we have an easy way to remember our three trig functions that we're going to be dealing with. And that's this little mnemonic up here. SOH CAH TOA. All right, SOH, SOH, CAH, CAH, TOA, TOA. SOH CAH TOA. I had a math teacher way back in the day. They used to say this was the great Indian chief of trigonometry, Chief SOH CAH TOA. Okay, I always said that's what I did when I stubbed my toe. I soaked my toe. SOH CAH TOA. Okay, whatever you can do to remember that, and remember the spelling of those, S-O-H. Now, what makes the spelling important? S-O-H, so, that tells us what the sign is equal to. S for sine. Sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. S-O-H. CAH, C-A-H. That tells us what cosine is equal to. C for CAH. A-H, adjacent over hypotenuse. TOA, T stands for tangent. O-A, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we say the sine of our angle is opposite over hypotenuse, O over H. And we say the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, A over H, CAH. and tangent of our angle is opposite over adjacent, TOA, T-O-A. So then whenever we have a triangle laid out, when we're given certain sides, we need to, like this first triangle right here, okay, we need to look at what we're given. We're given a 10. Well, where is that 10? Well, it's opposite of the 90. That is our hypotenuse. So what I always do, let me erase that real quick. What I do is I just label an H right there. That's the hypotenuse. Now we got this X over here. What is that X? Well, it depends on where our angle is. Here's our 50-degree angle. What would you describe that as? Is that adjacent to that 50 or opposite? Well, that's opposite, so that gets labeled with an O. The remaining side would be our adjacent, or right next door to us. Then we can just simply say, well, what do we have? Well, we have an opposite side because we have an X on it. We have a hypotenuse because we have a 10 on there. So we have the opposite and the hypotenuse. Which of these three up here, SOH CAH TOA, which one has an O and an H in it? Only one of them does. That's right, it's SO. So then we would say, or we would set up the sine of our angle, 50 degrees, equals the opposite side, which was our X, over our hypotenuse, which was a 10. And that's what you're going to be doing today on your homework. Just setting that up, nothing more. Now in the second middle triangle here, if we look at our layout, what we're given, again, are we given the hypotenuse? No, we're not given it, but we're given something on it. We're given an X on there, so I would say yes, we're given something about our hypotenuse. And then our 42-degree angle is way up here, so way over there would be opposite. I would label that with an O. That means that this 8, which is right next door to that 42, is our adjacent side. So now what are we given as far as our sides go? We're given the adjacent is 8 and the hypotenuse is X. We're given an adjacent and a hypotenuse. Which one of these three, SOH CAH TOA, has an A and an H in it? CAH does, for cosine. So then we could simply set up the cosine of our angle, which is 42 degrees, equals the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. My adjacent side is 8, my hypotenuse is X, and we would set up that problem. On our last one here, do we have the hypotenuse? We do not know the hypotenuse, so right off the bat, let's just cheat here a little bit. Look up here, SOH CAH TOA. Which one doesn't have an H in it? That's right, it's TOA, all right? So notice that that's the only one that doesn't deal with the hypotenuse. But let's just go ahead and label our sides here anyway. Here's our angle X. We would have to call the 12 opposite because it's way over there. And the 7 is adjacent because it's right next to it. So again, it's a TOA because we're dealing with an opposite and an adjacent. And we would set up the tangent of X equals our opposite side over our adjacent, or 12 over 7. And that would be what our trig function tells us. And all I want you to do today is set these up like this. You're not going to do anything more. You really don't even need a calculator to do today's homework. Okay, and that's it for today. That's what we're going to be looking at a little bit this week, is this right triangle trigonometry, and learn how to use those buttons on our calculator. So one thing you could do today is find your calculator, make sure you know where those buttons are. If you're using a calculator on your cell phone, figure out where they are. I know on an iPhone calculator you have to turn it sideways or landscape, and they'll pop up there. SOH CAH TOA, or sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay, so that's it for today. You're just setting these up. You're not doing anything more. Talk to you tomorrow.